Hi, hello, vanakkam, and welcome back to yet another episode on Little's Law YouTube channel. Last week, I had shared some of the videos on performance engineering and the client side performance testing, where we discussed about some of the concepts, and one of it is the first contentful paint. And we have got a question. Let's see what's the question.
Abhishek has asked the difference between first paint, first contentful paint, and first visual change.
Okay, so let's now see what is the difference between the first paint, the first contentful paint, and the first visual change. So before we see what is first contentful paint or first paint or first visual change, we will see how to see or how to find the first contentful paint. So here I have the Lighthouse report viewer. So for example, if I open MACD, the website, and then if I click on the Lighthouse extension. So this is an extension which we can download. We can add as an extension if you are using Chrome or if you're using your Edge browser or the Firefox browser. So if I'm opening it here, if I click on the Lighthouse, when I click on generate report, so this will take me to a Lighthouse report viewer where I get something like this. So it gives me the performance report, the accessibility report, the best practices, the SEO, and it also comes up with the score for each of them. So for example, if it is accessibility, it tells me what is the score for this. So the first contentful paint, we can see that here in the performance dashboard. So here you can see the performance, the performance dashboard, the performance score for MACD is just 27, and the first contentful paint, it takes around 2.5 seconds. So this is how we can see the first contentful paint. And when it comes to the first visual change, so I have a code here. I'll just show you, I'll just take you through what is the code and how to use it to find the first visual change. So now here you can see the code to see the first visual change, and this actually creates a performance observer to track the layout shift events. And the performance observer here, so this is actually an API that allows us to observe and capture the performance related events in the web page. And in this code, we are creating a new instance. So here you can see, and so this creates a new instance and pass a callback function that will trigger when the performance entries are recorded. And then when it comes to the list, so the next thing is creating the list. So the callback function receives a parameter list, and this list represents the list of parameter entries that are captured when the first visual change happens. And inside the callback function here, we extract the entries using the list.get entries and iterate over each entry so that we can understand what were the entries. And when it comes to the checking out for the layout shift event, so when it comes to checking out for the layout shift event, so for each entry we check if it is entry type and the property is equal to layout shift. So this is the first validation. So we have to validate whether the entry type is the layout shift. So the layout shift entry represents a visual change on the web page. And then when it comes to the recent user input, so here we can see the recent user input, which you can see the entry dot had recent user input. So if the property of this entry is true, then we will check the recent input, and this ensures that the layout shift was triggered by the user interaction and not an automatic change on the page, because anytime when we make when the user makes an interaction, so this should change, and that's why we will get this as a, we make sure that it's a true event, and then we will record it. And then finally, so if the entry passes the entry type and had recent input checks in the previous checks, so we consider this as a first visual change event. And in this code, we log a message. So here you can see we are logging a message that indicates that the first visual change occurred along with the start time. So what time does it start, and the property of the entry, which represents the timestamp when the event happened. And finally, we call the observe. So here you can see the last line, where we call the observe method on the performance observer object to start observing the layout shift. So the type property specifies the entry type. So here you can see the type property. So this specifies the entry type to observe, and in this case we are interested into the layout shift. So that's what we want to find with the first visual change. And the buffer property here at the last is set to true. So this allows the observer to capture the events that occur before it was registered. So by using this code, we can track the first visual change events on the web page by observing the layout shift events triggered by the user interactions. So now let me show you how to see this or how to use this code. So now I'm back to the MECD website, and here I right click on the page, I click on the inspect, and then I'm going to the console, so which is the second tab, and under the console if I paste the code which I have prepared and then I click on enter, so here you can see the first visual change occurred at this time, and then this first visual change occurred. So we get a series of events. So here you can see we have got four visual change. So what does this mean? So the first visual change occurred at approximately 1102 milliseconds, that is after 1 second, and then the second first visual change occurred at 1316. So these timestamps represent the moments when the web page experienced a visual change due to user interactions or any script driven modifications. So by logging these timestamps, we can analyze the timing and the frequency of visual changes. This can be helpful for understanding the performance and the user experience of our web page. So in case if I'm going to query, so I'm going to try here. Let's see how does it work. So I'm going to console and I'm pasting, sorry, let me paste the code here. And here you can see there are four visual changes that has happened, and here you can see the first has happened very quick, and then the last one was really, it actually took a lot of time. So this is how we can see the first visual change. And what about the other one? So the first paint. So the first paint is not directly available in the Chrome DevTools because it's an older performance metric that measured the time when any pixel is first painted on the screen, including the background color or any blank screen. So, and in fact, in the very modern versions of the Chrome DevTools or the Edge, the focus has shifted to more or other meaningful metrics like the first contentful paint which we see here, or the largest contentful paint which provides the better insights into the user experience. So the first paint metrics has been almost deprecated and it is no longer exposed in the dev tool interface, and in fact I have even tried it using the web page test but I'm not able to find it. So the first contentful paint is almost deprecated, so we can find the performance, or if we need to improve the performance we can use the first contentful paint or the largest contentful paint. So let's now move on to the difference of the first paint, the first contentful paint, or the first visual change. So here we will see the difference between the first paint, the first contentful paint, and the first visual change. So first let's see the definition of each of them. So the first paint is any pixel that is first painted on the screen. So here the screen means the web browser. So it can be the desktop browser or it can be your mobile browser. So any pixel that is painted, that is first painted on your screen is your first paint. So when it comes to the first contentful paint, it is the content that is first rendered on your screen. So that is the first contentful paint. And then when it comes to the first visual change, so that is if any user interaction. So it can be a visual change due to a user, or it can be a visual change, it can be due to a script interaction. So it can be anything like that. So that is the first visual change. So that's the definition of the first paint, the first contentful paint, and the first visual change. And when it comes to the timing significance, the first paint indicates the initial loading progress. So which means when the browser is loading, the initial loading time of the browser or the screen is the first paint. And when it comes to the first contentful paint, it marks the content, the primary content. When it appears, it is the first contentful paint. So that's the difference between the first paint and the first contentful paint. So the first paint is the initial loading, but the first contentful paint is the primary content that appears on the screen. And when it comes to the first visual change, it measures the interactivity and the responses, because here as we see already it is the visual change due to the user, or it's a visual change due to the script interaction. So they are basically the interactions and the responsiveness that happens by the basically by the user. So when it comes to the example, so what is the first paint? So any background color during the initial pages loading, during the loading of the initial page. So any background color or any blank screen, even that is the first paint. So what is the first contentful paint? So that is the header or any significant main content. So it has to be content. It's that's the basic thing. That's a basic difference between the first paint or the first contentful paint. So any header or any significant main content is the first contentful paint. And what about the visual change? So any CSS transitions. CSS is basically the style sheets and the animations that happens in the browser or in the screen or any dynamic changes is the first visual change. And then when it comes to the user perception, so during the first paint it may not show any meaningful content. It's just loading of the browser, or just the initial loading of the browser or the screen. So there is of course no any significant or any meaningful content. But when it comes to the first contentful paint, it shows some meaningful content, something like the logo or the header or anything that is related to the first content paint. So that is in fact it does not show the entire content, but it shows some meaningful content, and that's why the first contentful paint is differ from the first paint. And when it comes to the first visual change, it reflects the direct user interaction with the page, because here it's mostly the visual change because of the user or any script interaction. So it's basically it reflects any direct user interaction with the page. And now let's see the importance for the SEO. So before we see what is SEO, so before we see the importance for SEO, let me give you a glimpse of what SEO is. So the SEO stands for the search engine optimization, and this refers to the practice of optimizing a website or any online content to improve its visibility and ranking in search engine results pages. So for example, when we were entering, if you are entering Little Sla YouTube channel, so when you are searching for Little Sla YouTube channel, so it should come on top telling or coming up with different videos on our website rather than it stands at the 10th, the second page or the third page. So this SEO is basically optimizing the search engines. It's not only Google, it's about Bing or any software, any search engine optimization. So whenever you search for Little Sla, the website should be visible and the ranking should be higher, so that anybody who searches for, if you really want to do, if you really want to search some videos on neoload performance testing or jmeter performance testing, so at that point of time, if little slug come to the top of the page, so that means the page has been perfectly optimized based on the search engine. So the primary goal of the search engine optimization is to drive organic traffic to a website by making it more accessible and relevant to search engine algorithms. So that is where the importance of the SEO comes in. So when it comes to the first paint, it is less important for search engine ranking, and in fact, even it has not been used, so it is very less important for the search engine ranking. And when it comes to the first contentful paint, this is very important for the search engine ranking, for the better search engine ranking. And this, if the first contentful paint is better or if it is really good, your ranking will automatically be on the higher side. And when it comes to the first visual change, this can enhance the user experience and it will impact the SEO. So that is where the first visual change, so it has to be very important that the first contentful print and the first visual change has to be taken care of. And when it comes to the impact on the user engagement, so the first paint has very minimal contact on user engagement, because there is no user interaction at this point of time, because it happens even before or even during the page getting loaded, so there is nothing to do for the user. And when it comes to the first contentful paint, so this actually increase the user engagement to some extent, because we can see that the user or the user can visualize some of the headers or any other components when the first contentful paint is loaded. But when it comes to the first visual changes, what is the impact? So it enhances the user engagement and the interaction. So what are the common used tools? So as I told you initially, like how to find the first paint. So we have the web page test. So Lighthouse, it had the first paint, but now I think I could not see even the first paint. I could see only the first contentful paint. So it's same. So we can see the first paint in the web page test, but even when I just tried multiple times I'm not able to see the first paint since it is almost deprecated. So the first contentful paint, so we can concentrate more into the first contentful paint and the first visual change, which I have showed you how to see the first visual change in the browser for the MECD and for the Curry's website, and the first contentful paint, so we can see it through the Lighthouse tool or any other Chrome dev tools, the inbuilt tools. And then what are the metrics are affected by caching? So when it comes to the metrics affected by caching, so the first paint, it does not has any impact, so it has not been significantly affected by caching. But when it comes to the first contentful paint, it is slightly affected by caching because there are many components which, if it is already stored in your machine and if you're opening a particular website for the first time, you might get a lot of time because most of the components, something like this, the menus, any other JavaScript or any other content that gets loaded with along with the header or any other content will take time for the first time. So this actually has some impact. So this is slightly affected by the caching. And the first visual change, yes, it may be influenced by the caching mechanism because most of them and both of them are in fact has some impact by the caching. So what about the granularity? So the first paint is coarse grind metric, so which means, so this coarse grind metric, which is the first paint. So this metrics provides a high level or the aggregated view of performance, and this focuses on the broader aspect of the performance, and it may not provide detailed insights into the specific components or behaviors because there is nothing to show when it comes to the first paint. And the coarse grain metrics are typically used to evaluate the overall system performance or to monitor the high level trends. So for example, as we see, so this first paint is one of the example, and we have the total page load time and then the time to first byte or the average response time. So these are some of the coarse grind metrics. So, and these are useful for understanding the general performance of a system, but may not pinpoint the specific performance bottlenecks or issues. So, that is the main reason which I want you to take you through all the client side performance metrics, because even the average response time or the time to first byte, so they might not give you a specific performance bottleneck, so they will give you a general performance of the system. And that's the reason we are going through all these fine grain metric. And I would like to thank the questioner for asking this question, because this has in fact has opened a lot of doors for everybody who works on the performance testing. So when it comes to the fine grind metrics, so this provides a more detailed and specific view of performance, and it offers insights into the individual components, their behaviors, or any events within the system. So these fine grained metrics allows for a more granular analysis of the performance and can help, even it can pinpoint these specific areas for optimization or for improvement. And some of the examples I would say are the first contentful paint, or even in fact the time to interactive, or even the first visual change. So these are some of the fine grained metrics because they provide more precise information about specific performance aspects, and this enables the developers to identify and address specific performance bottlenecks. So when it comes to the developers, so importance for developers. So how important these metrics are for the developers is they help for the initial load time optimization when it comes to the first point, because they normally deal with only the initial loading of the process. So here in the second point we have already saw that, so it indicates the initial loading process. So they normally only help the developers with the initial loading optimization. So when it comes to the first contentful paint, so they are crucial for optimizing the content visibility since they were dealing with the headers or any other significant main content. And finally, when it comes to the first visual change, so they are very essential for optimizing the interactivity, because whenever the user he clicks the button or he clicks the text box or he even enters any value, so all of them has to be optimized. So all those interactions has to be optimized, and that's very essential when it comes to the client side performance testing. So again, I would like to thank the subscribers and everyone who was watching my previous videos and even this video. I would like to really thank you everyone for watching the entire video. Thanks so much, and if in case if you have any questions, please do comment in the comment section. So until I meet you in another interesting video, it's bye bye from Vasan Shanmugam and Little